70% of Gen Z were asked, do you feel like the American dream is in reach? And they said no. That's not a good sign. So we are going to take a look at, is the system broken or are we missing something? How do we help this new generation moving up into adulthood feel better about their financial situation and feel like there is reason to work hard to achieve the American dream? So if that sounds interesting to you, we will dive into that in a second. Hopefully it does. It is very important because even if you're in Gen X or baby boomer, the next generation moving up is very important to us, and we need to make sure that we are paying attention to them. They set trends. They set where money is being spent. Oftentimes the younger generation is very important to our society. And if they are feeling like they cannot make it ahead in life, we have big problems coming down the pike. So again, if that sounds interesting, stick around. We will talk about that. And before we dive in, I want to introduce myself for those of you who might be new, and welcome. I'm Lisa. I'm a financial advisor. I have been for over 14 years, and I help people get to financial freedom, or a form of the American dream, as quickly as possible. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome. We're so happy to have you. So let's get into this, because people often will say, well, that's just the young generation. That's how they always feel. But that's not always true. I felt very, I'm kind of straddled between Gen X and millennial. I consider myself Gen X because I feel like I was part of that music and that scene. But I straddle right in between. And essentially, when I was getting older, when I was graduating from college, I felt like I had a lot of opportunity out there. Excuse me, I'm trying not to sneeze. And so when I had all that opportunity out there, I felt like I was unstoppable. I felt like I was able to achieve what the American dream was for me. And I don't know if the American dream that I feel like is the American dream is necessarily what Gen Z feels like is the American dream. There could be a mismatch in that, and we're going to discuss that in a second. But I do think, I was young. I'm not that old. I'm 43 right now. And I do remember that feeling of like, I can conquer the world. I can do this stuff. I can accomplish the American dream, which, fortunately, I feel like I have. There's still more stuff to work for. There's still more things I'm trying to do. But I do feel like I've done a lot to get to that American dream status. And so let's talk about what the American dream is. For me, when I was growing up, the American dream was to own a home, to, be able to have a car, to have a family, to afford everything that I wanted to, be able to go on trips, be able to enjoy life, as well as have a nice career, maybe build a business, that kind of thing. And then the idea is, hopefully this generation is going to do a little bit better than the generation previously. That's the idea, right? It's the idea of 2 kids and a dog. I don't have kids. I decided not to have kids, but that's the idea, is that, getting to that ability to get to financial freedom. And financial freedom means I get to do what I want, when I want, without the burden of money. Now, I'm not 100% at that yet, but we're definitely working our way and seeing some progress on that. I try to help other people do that as well. And so that's what I see as the American dream. Now, the younger generation, I feel like, sees the American dream a little differently. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but I think one of them is that what we portray in the media is different now than what we portrayed back then. So when I wanted to consume media, it was television, it was, VHS tape or DVD. It was a CD. We were barely kind of getting into, when I got into college, Napster and stuff came out, that kind of stuff was starting to happen. The internet was still kind of new to us. You had to go see a movie in the theater if you wanted to see it when it came out. All of that stuff was new. There was no streaming. There was no social media. There was maybe MySpace a little bit. I remember Instant Messenger was big, that kind of thing. And and online dating started. That kind of stuff was kind of new to us. And so we weren't getting inundated with outside influences that weren't welcomed into our home. Meaning, if I wanted to listen to music, I could turn on the radio and they would play, but I got to choose, I'm going to turn on alternative, I'm going to turn on classical music, I'm going to turn on that kind of thing. If I put a CD in, I knew what kind of music I was going to be listening to. It was all based off of what I wanted to invite into my world. And nowadays, that's not true. And a lot of people might disagree with this point, and that's okay. It's America. We're allowed to disagree on things. Right now, when I turn on Facebook or Instagram or any of these social media sites, you're inviting things in, and there are things in my feed that I didn't actually choose to invite in. Ads, suggested influencers I should be watching, things like that. And all of those add into my vision of the world, right? My vision of where I stand in the world, my vision of the world in general. And I don't really get to choose what's being put into my world. And that is what Gen Z has had their entire life. And so when they open up a social media app, whatever they choose, TikTok, whatever, they are getting little snippets, like 30 seconds, a minute snippets of somebody else's world, whether they wanted it or not. And, it's showing all the highlights of life. I'm on a yacht, I'm going to a 5-star restaurant, I'm trying an $1,000 bottle of wine. I'm all these things, right? All these very salacious, things that are going to get people's eyeballs, and a lot of this started from reality television, I would say. I didn't have a lot of reality television growing up, but as I got older, definitely started up. But, reality TV to me was like real world with people screaming at each other. I mean, it was not really something you would aspire to be. And now, you look at any of the Real Housewives and all that stuff, they're all going on these huge trips. They're all doing, they say that they have economic problems, but they're all doing these amazing things and driving these amazing cars and doing all this stuff. And that has seeped into social media. It's everywhere, right? People feel like they have to dress a certain way and look a certain way and be a certain type of person in order to be successful. So I guess my point of this is that we don't really know what Gen Z thinks the American dream is. Their definition of the American dream could be totally different than what we think in the older generations as the American dream. And so it's worth having those conversations with the young people in your life of what their reality is and what they think that they're supposed to be. Because if you feel like you're supposed to be way up here, and the American dream is supposed to be reachable, this seems horrible to try to get to. And they have a lot of reason to feel like things are hard. Things economically are difficult for people. Student loans, the average debt's about $37,000 or more. Rent and versus income is very difficult. About 50% of people's income are going to housing. Way too high. They don't have savings. They don't have an emergency fund. They barely have bank accounts open. And they don't understand long-term goals necessarily. Because really, if you think about it as a young person, your long-term goal is like 4 years. 4 years to work hard to get into college, and then you get through 4 years of that. We have less people going to medical school, less people going to law school. All that stuff, because they can't see that far ahead. They have a hard time getting through the 4 years of school because they can't figure out the major that they want and follow that through. That is not their fault. I'm not blaming Generation Z for this. I'm just saying that they have a much harder time with that long-term planning. that really all of us have a hard time with, but they really don't know how to do it. And I don't know if the other generations have been a great role model, honestly, on that, but we can get into that in another video. But you know, this comparison, this access to information so quickly, this short video form, and all this stuff, you know, it's hard to think of that long-term process for kids. I mean, even, I hate to say it, even just sitting there with a cassette tape, having to fast forward to the song you want, you did have to be patient. You don't even need that anymore. You scream at Alexa and she gives you, you know, gives you the song you want. It's just not like that anymore. And if you want to have even more access, you just pay a monthly subscription, which we've got way too many monthly subscriptions going on. That's a whole other thing, right? But the other thing that is having a hard problem is that they have these ideals of what they think, you know, life is supposed to be like. That's totally not realistic for the majority of people. And then on top of it, we're not teaching them any kind of finance. Financial literacy is nowhere to be found anymore. And I would say that that is a problem that has been going on a really, really long time. I didn't get any kind of financial education in school. My husband didn't. I went to a private school. He went to a public school. Neither one of us got that from school. We're lucky that we've sought it out and we're able to do something. But it's very difficult when you don't have a basis on anything to know how to build towards something. So they don't understand how to balance their monthly budget. They don't understand that looking at their credit cards and being aware of what they're spending is going to make a difference. They don't understand the basics of how a head of lettuce got the cost that it got. You know, they don't understand all the different things that add up to what our consumer goods cost. And some people will say, well, corporate's greedy and they put a big profit. I'm talking about before profit on there. I'm talking about just the base cost of something is not understood by the majority of the young people. And I would say, unfortunately, the majority of people in America, I don't think people understand that it's not a switch of the button to change the cost of a head of lettuce or eggs. Eggs is a big deal right now. Eggs and coffee and chocolate, those have exorbitant cost right now. And I think my husband said that he heard somebody say in Northern California they paid $35 for eggs. It's insanity. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's definitely getting higher. I paid $11 for eggs. Yes, they were pasture raised, but still, I mean, they used to be $6 before. Now they're $11, like within a month period. Well, there's lots of things that go into that. It's not just a greedy corporation sticking $5 more profit on there. There's a flu going around in the chicken world, and it's causing problems. They're not getting the product that they used to get. They're not getting the quality of product that they used to get, and it's making eggs go up in price. But see, they don't understand any of those little logistics on how things are priced. And so it makes it really hard to have a tangible idea of how finances work when we don't teach any kind of financial literacy in the schools. And we don't make it fun. We don't make it interesting. It's not sexy to know finance. Well, it is, because you know how to conquer things if you know how finance works. But we don't push that. And when I say we, I mean the older generations are not helping the younger generation understand this either. We have some responsibility as well to help them understand how to save, how to build towards a dream of home ownership. Yes, it's harder. For sure it's harder to own a home now. Is it impossible? No, but you need to understand the basics in order to get there. You need to understand the percentages. What, you know, if you get 20%, do you still have a PMI insurance? Do you still have, they don't understand any of this stuff. And it's very difficult for them to learn it if we don't teach it to them. So if it's not going to be taught in the schools, as parents out there, I beg of you to teach this to your kids. It's very, very important that they understand this stuff. And if you don't understand it, learn with them. Okay? This is not a time to say, I don't understand it, so I can't teach it to them. You need to learn it as well and help them learn it and learn together. That's kind of a nice thing of, I would say, a parent and child relationship. I would imagine, I don't have kids, but I am a child of somebody, so learning together is sometimes nice. And, use things like online tools, videos like this, things like that to help. And if you would like certain subjects to be talked about on this channel, please email me and let me know. I'd love to provide what you guys need. So, a lot of people say, well, to get out of this, we need to raise wages, we need to do all this stuff. Yes, but without those basics of redefining what success means for the younger generation, financial literacy, getting the basics down, all of that's going to go out the window. Okay, so we can raise wages, we can take away the student loans, we can do all this stuff. It doesn't put them in a better place in the long run. That, again, is short-term thinking. Does it make it easier for them? Yeah, but they still don't have the basics of anything. And so really the basics are important. So I talk a lot about celebrating small wins. Help them understand that it's not about perfection, but it's about progress. So if they're saving $10 a month, that is going to add up over time, and that is going to be something that will help them in the long run. If it's about, avoiding impulse spending, that will be a really wonderful tool for them to utilize for themselves, not just going off and buying something, but seeing what else you have in your house that you could use instead. It builds creativity. I feel like a lot of times because we do things so impulsively, we lose creativity. I know I do. And so I try to look at things and go, is there a different way I could use this kitchen tool, to accomplish what I want for the new kitchen tool that I've been thinking about? Is there something that I could use to get that same result? And that's how you use your brain and you build creativity. It's just amazing how we've gone away from that. And that's what made America amazing, is our innovation. And we need to bring that back. So how can you, help your kids or the young people in your life? Start having these conversations with them. Ask them what they believe is success. Ask them what they think the American dream is. Have realistic conversations with them. Help them pull back from the social media. It doesn't mean you turn it off or any of that stuff. I'm not telling anybody to do that. But what I'm saying is help them get some different perspective on things. Tell them what it was like, not the old story of like, I went through the snow 3 miles one way to get to school. I'm just saying, tell them what it was like. How did we have to get our information before the internet? We had to go to the encyclopedia. We had to go to the library. We had to do all this stuff that they could not even fathom doing. I always laugh because I'm one of these people that go, well, let's look it up. And I go on, my search engine and I find something. And I laugh because I think when I was younger, there was no way for me to do that. I could go to our encyclopedia, but our encyclopedia was 5-10 years old. That information might not be in there. And so it's amazing how we have not realized that the amount of information coming into our world is actually hurting us in some respects. With the habits that we're building, with all that stuff, doesn't mean you stop having that information come in. It just means we have to build the basics with people. And this is important because Gen Z is important for the rest of us to do well as well. And so we need to be there. So you might want to have conversations with them like, what's one habit you could do today to secure your future? What's one big dream that we could work on together? I have this whole thing that I do called Bucket List Accelerator that I do with often older people than Gen Z, but it's about live the lifestyle you love now, but you're also building along the way to continue that up. And that's not something that can't be accomplished. It just takes planning. And so helping people plan, doing vision boards, all that stuff is so important, because I do think that they get in their own heads and they think success has to look one way when it doesn't have to look like that for them. So I think that's a good place to stop. Hopefully this sparked some interest in you. You might not agree with everything I said, and that's okay. If you'd like to contact me and let me know what you didn't like, that's okay too. I don't have to agree with you, and you don't have to agree with me. But I do think that this is something worth discussing. I think that this is going to be a financial crisis if we don't get our arms around it. And with that, I'm going to leave you. That's not a very happy place to put it. How's a better way? I think that this could open up dialogue, though, and bring the generations closer together and help the younger generation feel less hopeless. You know, that would be wonderful if they felt hope and motivation like I did when I graduated from college. That's a better place to end it. Let's end it there. All right, so with that, hope you are doing well. Keep fighting the good fight, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.